say we gave up our jobs. At that point, I was working for the Crofters Union, which is now the Crofting Federation. But I gave up my job in 2001 and went away sailing for a few years. And while we were away, we planned our conversion of the bunkhouse into a cottage, which we've now done. And it's been very popular. Now, at this point, I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you. So please just bear with me while I try and do that. Probably not going to work. I hope you can still hear me. I'll try again now. No, I'm having difficulty with this. I don't know why, so I'm just going to not bother with that. But anyway, just you've probably seen the links to my website, or the links to my cottage on the SCF's Croft Holiday site, and that is a good way to promote your tourism business, whichever way you're doing, whichever tourism thing you're doing. Our cottage, it was an old byre, and we made it into a cottage for just 2 people to keep the numbers manageable. It's right on the seashore, and there's lots of wildlife around, and we listed in various, we have our own website, which Jeff, my husband, made for us, and we listed in various platforms for a number of years and had people coming to stay for a week or sometimes 2 weeks. We wouldn't take anybody for less than that, because it is a lot of work doing all the changeovers. For those of you who are thinking of doing a holiday cottage, be aware it's a lot of work. You have to put a lot of effort into it. I see Helen's with us now, so welcome, Helen. Good to see you there. We did very well for quite a number of years, and then Airbnb came on the scene, and a lot of other people started providing accommodation, because Airbnb made it easy for them to get set up on the Airbnb site, and you didn't need to have your own website. When we first started, there was 2, ourselves and 1 other holiday cottage on the little road where we live in Lower Breckish. Now, on the same half-mile stretch of road, at my last count, there are 20 holiday let places. So Airbnb has caused a huge amount of competition, but it's very attractive to people thinking of setting up, going into Airbnb. I would just issue a few warnings. Airbnb is very controlling. It's not all sunshine and easy stuff. More and more, some guests can be quite difficult, and they know now how to complain, and Airbnb will give them refunds for all sorts of pretenses. So just be aware of that. I would recommend, if you are thinking of, thanks for that, Sandra, if you are thinking of going on Airbnb, don't just be with Airbnb, also go with other platforms. In Sky, for example, there's several platforms which promote accommodation on Sky, and we also use Walk Highlands, and they have a section on accommodation, and that's useful if you're in the kind of place, which I'm sure we all are, where people like to do outdoor stuff and go for climbing or walking. That's a good one. There's all sorts of others. Just do your research and sign up with 1 or 2. I think actually it's probably more effective than Airbnb, cost effective, because you just pay a one-off fee, and then people book directly with you, and you're not paying any commission. Certainly that's my preference, and I'm back to using Airbnb as seldom as I can now, and I think we get better guests, and it's certainly much less stressful. If you're setting up a holiday let, make it attractive. Don't leave it plain, thinking that it's easier to keep it clean if you don't have much in the way of clutter around. I'm not saying make it cluttered, but have personal items around, things that make it homely and welcoming to people. And don't try and squeeze in as many beds as you can. Keep it manageable, to just have a sensible number of people. I mentioned difficult guests. I think the kind of guests that you'll get here are in crofting areas are going to be good guests. It's more in cities where there are problems. Though I did hear of a problem here in a crofting area just near me yesterday, but I won't go into that. I think that's everything I need to say now, and I've nearly got to my allotted time. So we'll move on now to Russell, please. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them afterwards.
Right, thanks, Fiona. I'm going to talk about certificated locations, which are really small caravan sites, and they're called that because they are certified or certificated by a small number of, I suppose, responsible organisations, things like the Caravan and Motorhome Club. And the point of that is that they have a national agreement which allows you to set up one of these sites under their control or under their auspices without getting planning permission. So that's, yeah, and that's the picture there, just come up, you should be able to see that. So the point to say is that if you do it under this scheme, then you don't need planning permission, but you have to stick to the rules of the game. And those are, you're only allowed up to 5 caravans or motorhomes. The people who are staying must be members of the club of which you're doing it through, and they can only stay for 28 days at the longest. Right, so we've been running this for over 20, well, getting on for 20 years now, and we're in Bonar Bridge, which is in southeast Sutherland. So we're not quite in the North Coast 500, but we're not far away from it. Okay, so what are the advantages? Well, if you get something like this, it's a modest but a fairly steady income. In most years in the past, we've made about £3,000 a year profit. And we're now up to charging £14 a night, and probably next year we'll put that up to £15 a night. So it doesn't sound a lot, but it's a big margin, because really over and above that, you're just paying for the electricity. Right, the workload that you get, it's another view of the site, and you can see where we are. We're up above, that's Loch Migdale. You can see in the Struy Hill in the background. So the Dornoch Firth is just over the first rise you can see. And that picks out a couple of the features that we have. We've put in hard standing for vans, which is most people look for, and we've put in electricity. So there's a couple of electricity points there that you can see. So yeah, there's not a great deal of work actually involved in running the site, and the timing of it is really at your own discretion, so it fits around croft work well. If you're doing it through one of these clubs as we are, then you don't need to do any marketing. You don't need your own website. Everything is done through them, because you're only allowed to take members anyway. So it's directed to them. It does give you extra opportunities for direct sales. So we sell eggs and chutneys and things from the door to people, not as much as we used to, but you know, the opportunity is there. The fact that it's a working croft is an attraction for some people. The people for whom it's not aren't going to come to you anyway. There is some support from, in our case, the Caravan and Motorhome Club. There is a rep who comes around once a year, and you can see in the screen there the sign we've got in the gate. They supply all the signs and things. And as I say, if you are setting up, talk to their representative first and get. Right, so what are the disadvantages? Well, you obviously get setup costs. We put in electricity, we put in water, we put in the hard standing. You have to fence off the area. And that was really all, because the waste disposal, we use our house septic tank. And you can see just on the right of that photograph, just in front of the black car there, there's a screen round. So that's where our septic tank is, and the people empty their waste directly into that. So because it's next to the house, then that reduced the costs, and financially it took us about 2 years, less than 2 years, to recoup the cost of putting in the fencing and the electricity and the water. So in terms of payback, that's a very good return on your money. The other disadvantages, time. Time, obviously, people like to chat, they're on holiday, you're not, you're working, but they chat away, and you have to make time for that. It's also quite time, because you've got to be there every day, either to see people on and off, and to take phone calls and email bookings. We do everything by phone or email. We don't take online bookings, and we take all the bookings ourselves. We don't do anything through the Caravan Club. You do have to deal with people. Some of them are more interesting than others, and I'll just leave it as that. There is work involved. You've got to cut the grass, you've got to empty the bins, and emptying bins and sorting out recycling seems to take a huge amount of time as you get on. So if you are interested, things you've got to consider if you're setting up is that you do need an appropriate field. It's got to be at least half an acre, preferably more. It's got to be flat. Ours looks fairly flat in that photograph, but it's now getting lots of ridges and bumps, and as it gets wetter and muddier in the winter, that can be a problem. It's going to be flat, and you've got to fence it off from the animals. You've got to think about access. People, some big motorhomes, some double axle caravans, they've got to be able to get onto it, they've got to maneuver. We've got single track roads coming up here, which shouldn't be a problem, but some drivers are more experienced than others, let's put it that way. We put in hard standing, and that's a good idea. Electricity you have to have, and water going into it. That site is actually just next to the house. You can't see it, but just off to the left of that photograph is our house, so we ran the electricity and the water from that, which was pretty accessible and not too expensive to do. If your flat field with good access is a long way from electricity and water and waste disposal, then that's going to be more expensive. We put in Wi-Fi last year because we were getting the house redone. That people like that. It's not essential, but we do like it, and we've bumped £1 a night on the cost. And we hope that will carry us through the winter months when we'll still have to pay for the Wi-Fi. There won't have anyone on the site. Yeah, speak to your neighbours if you think that's going to be a problem and you're thinking about it. We found that people actually quite liked it. They liked seeing, traffic coming and going, and things appearing on top of the hill. But not everyone would necessarily agree with that. We haven't put in toilets and showers. For a 5-van site, that wouldn't be cost effective. But that's again up to you. If you had an outbuilding and maybe facilities there already, and if you could advertise that, you could get more business. And for that reason, we don't take people who just have tents. The big thing you'd have to do if you're thinking about this is really work out what your income from it will be. We have seen last year, we didn't open until the middle of July because of COVID, and we were still busier than we've been in the previous 20 years. This year, we're really busy again. There's 1, 2, there's 3 vans on site in that photograph. I was taking them last month. We've been averaging 3 or 4. Previously, we'd have averaged 2 a night, maybe over the summer months, 2 or 3. If you're doing your business planning, your financial calculations, yeah, I don't know how you would do that. Whether COVID is going to lead to a permanent boost in demand for motorhome places, or whether this is just this last year and this year and maybe next year, we'll wait and see. And that's really, I'll take questions at the end, but that's within time for you, Fiona. I'll pass it on. If you just, Sandra, if you got the photograph of the open all year one. No, maybe not. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's just another photograph. We are open all year, so we have a a number of, we would people stay all winter because of the snow there. Right, that's it. That was some people who arrived at the beginning of December one year and they couldn't get off the site till the end of January. But they amuse themselves building igloos. Right, back to you, Fiona.
Okay, thank you, Russell. That a lot of practical tips and information there. I'm sure that a lot of people find that very useful. And that motorhome looks like a monster to drive around. It's colossal. So I'm sure there'll be lots of points for Russell once we get to the end of all the presentations. But we'll move on now to Phil, who's going to talk about wildland croft. So over to you, Phil.
Read Jeanette next. I'm happy to go next.
Sorry,
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, yes. Jeanette. Sorry,
After
Jeanette.
Jeanette. No bother at all. Well, good evening. And it's nice to follow on from Russell, because tonight I'm very pleased to launch this new leaflet, and Sandra will be able to share the electronic link to it in the chat. But if there is anybody who would like paper versions, just contact me after the meeting tonight. So this leaflet was an output from a UIF funded project. Now the project was all about natural capital, which is like the environment, the scenery, and in the Highlands, the two industries that rely on natural capital are crofting and tourism. However, as our project started to quantify, often these can be in conflict. And now the ongoing tensions from poor tourist behaviours and the lack of infrastructure has been raised several times by the SCF at Holyrood cross-party crofting groups. Now, for the motorhome section, these behaviours can include parking in inappropriate places, such as cemetery car parks and sometimes shockingly cemeteries, disposing of waste in drains or rivers, litter, road congestion, as we saw in Russell's presentation, some of these motorhomes can be pretty large, and also livestock worrying by dogs. So as part of this project, I worked a lot with Skye Connect, and I met with their motorhome sector group. Now this group represents the larger commercial sites on Skye. And obviously, like Russell mentioned, with COVID, I would say that the motorhome clientele has changed a lot. It's certainly become a lot younger, and there's a lot of people who are new to it as a way of taking holidays. So but this sector group really felt that there was plenty of demand. So if crofters did want to start smaller sites, that there wouldn't really be a threat to them. And they also felt, reflecting a wee bit what Fiona said about how tourism was sometimes a bit slower, that actually having more sites dispersed across the Highlands might be quite good to really encourage visitors to stay in local areas rather than, as in Skye, you know, there's quite a lot of a tick box culture of getting around the hot spots of the fairy pools, the Fairy Glen, Store, Coral Beach and the Crang. And we have mentioned some of the disbenefits with congestion, and interestingly that group was like really open to innovative solutions for dealing with some of the congestion issues. At the same time that we were doing this project, the Highland Council launched its own version of the Continental Airs sites. And I have to say, I do have my reservations about opening a lot of informal sites when there's not a good waste disposal infrastructure network. Because I know, Russell, in your site that you were using, you mentioned you were using septic tanks, but sometimes the chemicals can be quite bad for septic tanks. So huge usage. I know a lot of village halls and that ban caravan cassette disposal because they're concerned about the health of their septic tank long term. So I think there's an important balance to be struck between making sure that we want to capitalize on this new thing, but you want to make sure that you've got plans in place to cope with it, because we certainly don't want to force people to do bad behaviours. The other thing, though, to tackle this issue that the Highland Council did was this year that there was a small support for existing campsites to try and allow to try to allow non-residents to dispose of their waste in their sites and also charge an agreed small sum. But I have to admit, I have not yet researched uptake of this or how successful it's been. So to go back to the leaflet, which you can see on the screen, that's great. It covers really practical issues such as location, the planning considerations, and bookings and payments. But I think that whatever diversification and welcoming tourists onto your croft that you're wanting to do, I think as crofters, whatever we diversify into, I think it's really important that we both value and then tell our crofting story. It certainly clearly enriches the stay for your visitors, and Russell did make me smile. It's true that you do have to, maybe when you're thinking of your plans, allocate time for them to chat to you. But for when you're thinking about the disbenefits that tourism can bring to crofting, I really think if you've got an audience there, it can be a really important way, like to impactful and an effective way to pass on messages, such as having dogs on leads around livestock, and the importance of, like, for example, maybe not parking on an area because it's actually a silage field. Because I think all these kind of issues of conflict, if there's a human story behind it, it's much easier to nudge good behavior. So and just to finish, it's important to think, like, when you've got guests on your croft, you've got a captive audience. So like Russell said, is selling your own produce, and there's a way that you can do that when you're not even on the sites now, because there's a farm vending machines, so you could sell your own products or local products from fellow crofters. Another thing that motorhomes often get a bad reputation for is maybe not spending enough money in the local area. But I think if you did decide to have a site on your croft, if you really promote the local cafes, the local pubs, the local restaurants, I think you'd be surprised at how much churn that there would be in your local area. And not to verge onto Phil's territory for his talk, but once you've got people on your thing, that could be an audience that you could do croft tours to visit the animals, maybe feed some lambs at the right time, and really teach visitors about the crofting system and the history of your croft. And like Phil's going to talk to us now, wildlife tours, so they can learn a wee bit more about the important wildlife and plants that we have. Well, thank you all very much for your time, and if there's any questions, happy to take them at the end.
Thank you, Jeanette. That was really interesting, and a lot of good advice there again. I think we're doing really well with our experts here and various things. And I can see from the chat that we have quite a number of folk who are new to crofting or just going to be starting on their croft soon. So I hope all you people are finding this helpful. And if you have any specific questions as we go along, please do ask them at the end. Right, now we'll go on to Phil and his wildlife croft.
I'll just get my screen up. Give it a second to look. Are you seeing the croft image there? Lots of thumbs, thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Phil Knott. I wear many hats. One of them is crofter in Drumfern. I also work at the West Highland College, and my background is primarily in wild nature. That's kept me employed in Scotland. That's what brought me to Scotland about 14 years ago. I've been very centrifugal in my distribution of Scotland, very much far flung around the edges, working with nature, working with wildlife tourism as well as, but not just nature conservation, working with crofters and land managers. And it's been very fortunate. I was quite mobile and moving around a little bit. I've got the opportunity to get this croft 6 years ago. So my partner Laura and I, we moved here 6 years ago to Drumfern, which is in the neck of Slate in South Skye. So 6 years is not enough time for those trees to grow. Those are not our trees that are on the croft there. They were planted about 15 years ago. So that's, for some people, that would be quite a hindrance, and hadn't been grazed, hadn't been cut, hadn't been managed at all. So nice to have the trees there. But the understory was just thick, and it was mounded as a common way of planting, where we dig out with a digger, scrape a hole, and then plant the tree on the spoil on the top, which means it's just holes full of water and holes everywhere. I'm 6'4", and I was falling in holes on the croft, so letting my children loose was certainly something I had to be canny of. It looks from the road just like something that's not really had much attention, but the core, the middle part of the croft, gets a huge amount of attention, and we're managing it for food production. It's a productive croft, but most definitely for nature as well. But using nature to help heal the land, we're trying to get a high base level of fertility back into this, use the trees for shelter, using the trees to actually fertilize the ground as well, and produce a lot of food. With our background in nature and wildlife, we thought this is something we can work on as well, and have that as a marketing angle, something we love. And essentially we live in our own little nature reserve as that, but it is a productive croft. And this year we've got more apples, even after 5 years of apple trees, we've got more apples than we know what to do with, which is a great position to be in. And then I think we're looking at 250 kilos of produce for the year coming in. Just we weighed everything this year. We thought we'd give it a go. So it's not just trees, most definitely. We have a self-catering unit. We didn't build this. This was again on the croft when we got it. And as you can tell from the first image, it's right at the top there, right at the top of the croft. So it's isolated, which is quite good for a lot of self-catering. It's often attached to the croft house and things. So for this one, we can attract a lot of honeymoons and folk who really just want to get away from it. A lot of writers, a lot of yoga folk, painters, all sorts of folk who really want something where they're not really served. We don't have a sea view. We have a mountain view. We're faced east, but nature, as you can see with just the profusion of flowers, is a core part of our marketing and strategy. And that takes management to get that. Some parts of the croft are just left, but our open areas are managed, and I manage them essentially as hay meadows. I seed into a lot of this. A lot of these are perennial tall herbs that take a long time to establish. So we are stock free because we are establishing fruit trees and fruit bushes and things. It just isn't compatible even with electric fencing at the moment in the hay that we create, and it's amazing diversity. So I've got a wildlife background, and so I'm able to record and identify a lot of the things. A lot of this will be quite surprising, I suppose. I do moth trapping, and we've had 300 species of moth on the croft. That's fairly impressive. That's the young trees that really make a real difference to that. And that's a huge biodiversity kind of food web that goes up from that as well. If you just had a bare land croft, you still have obviously a lot of biodiversity, but nothing compared to the tree cover and the tall herb cover that we've got in there. The bird, the birds feed themselves on what's available outside, and so that's very seasonal. We've recorded all the plants, so we can find here, as you can see, a great diversity. Pretty much everything you'd expect to see here, we have recorded at some stage, whether it's regular or not, and it's fairly crawling with things. If you go for a night drive, coming down from the croft, we got.
So you're breaking up a bit at times. We're losing you. I wonder if we might hear you better.
Slow down, because there's about 20 or 30 toads on the road hopping across from all the will do. Thanks for that, Fiona. I will try that, and I'll speak a bit slower as well. So a fantastic wildlife haven as it is, and outside of the croft we need to have a deer fence because of our trees, red and roe deer, lots of deer down here. And we have the rut starting soon. Next cold night, and we have a lot of red deer down here, which is a problem in many cases, but it's also a very good wildlife factor, and lots of folk enjoy that. Just trying to click on to the next slide. Now, of all the wildlife we market, it's our ducks and hens that people really and that's the story as well. So yes, we have all this wonderful wildlife that we celebrate, but on the croft, this is what people will want to see. They want to know the names of our ducks and our hens. They want to feed them. Can we feed them? And as Jeanette and Russell have touched on, it takes a lot of time and engagement. And do we have the time for that? Yeah, we make time for that. That's part of our policy. If folk want to have a little tour around the croft with us, absolutely, we will do that. If they want to feed some layer pellets to the hens, great. And we can tell them a little bit of a story about what we do. And the things that they share in terms of their social media and their write-ups, their postcards home, is the produce that we provide on the croft as well, because we provide that usually free of charge or at a small cost, and that is part of the story as well. So all the wildlife that we've been trying to celebrate, is still part of it, but at the end of the day, this is what gets people home. It's the connection to the croft, and has flavour, has taste, and it's for a lot of the folk we've had folk up from London the last few weeks. They never tasted even courgettes, things like that. They couldn't believe it. So for marketing, I'll just touch on that. We had to rename our croft anyway because of the division. You know what it's like with crofting law and things. We could not be 3/4 anymore, and so we took on a new name, and we thought we would brand ourselves on that basis. And so we used the stone chat as our very common bird around here as our logo. And quite boldly, I suppose, call ourselves Wildlife Croft. That's not saying other crofts don't have wildlife, but that's just our marketing angle on that. And we use the alder trees and the cuckoo flowers as part of our image as well. That makes a difference for our marketing, most definitely. So on Instagram and Facebook, and things, we're very popular because we can offer lots and lots of photogenic things, lots of stories. People who've been with us before can follow with us, understand what we're about, know that we're genuine, what we're talking about, and they can engage on that basis. And they know they spent the time with us as well. And that helps build up rapport with folk. People are interested in the land management and the crofting side of things. So we cover all bases. And our posts, for example, only 1 in 10 would feature our self-catering. The rest will be built upon wildlife, food stories, depending on the season. That's obviously winter posts there. And that makes a difference, most definitely, because if you've got self-catering and you're trying to do social media on that, then if you post it because you live in your kitchen, there's only so many things you can do. With a croft, you've got a story, you've got animals, you've got view, and with our wildlife handle, we've obviously got lots of things. So I take pictures. These are all my pictures I've taken down the years if you use the hashtags appropriately. I'll just very quickly touch on the wildlife tour industry. That was a big part of it. Sorry, I just dipped out there. Are you still with me? Am I still screen?
We've lost your
Yes,
screen,
we can hear you,
Phil.
Phil. Yes.
We can hear you, but we've lost your screen.
Sorry about that. Must have been my connection just dipped out. So I'll just reshare. Just on the last couple of slides. My video if I can. Right, hopefully back on. That was quite a quick save. So most wildlife tours are done by tour operators and they're organized tours. It's quite a challenge doing a one-day tour, trying to see everything, and particularly in places like Skye and Crofton counties, a lot of ground to cover. There's only so many roads and infrastructure you can do. So they tend to be more 3, 5, 7-day tours, often all inclusive. It's a challenge to do it in these areas though, because of our busyness these days. The hotels are quite a challenge. So a lot of the tour operators don't really dip in here so much as they used to. It's a difficult thing to get the block bookings, and we're just busier. It's a busier place to run wildlife tours at the same time as being in these areas is a bit of a challenge. And you're obviously dealing with inclement weather. For crofters to tap into that market is quite a challenge because the tour companies have got quite tight margins. They don't really want to be paying out for a croft experience such when you can just be driving around and interpreting to tap into. So you're looking at the individual experiences markets. We talked on Walk Highlands as a kind of marketing, people coming up, staying in a location and then doing their own thing for a holiday, doing their own guided walks and as such. But we're seeing a lot more Airbnb experiences and interpretive sessions where folk just can offer something on the croft, even if it's a walk around with the animals, even it's just tea on the croft. You'll see these things. If you search on Airbnb experiences, not Airbnb, you'll see these things are available right now. And people will be charging 45, 50 pounds for just a walk and a talk. And a lot of you will be thinking that's crazy. Why would people want to spend 50 pounds to have a walk around a croft? But people do, and they rate it 5 stars and they get exactly what they wanted. They often, you come around Skye, for example, where we are, and you can plan your own day, but you don't really get to see anyone. It's not a real experience. If you can get to spend time with a crofter on a croft, talking about his animals, talking about the history, then that's most definitely worth it. And if you put something like that together, I would be confident it would sell. Folk need infrastructure, most definitely. So even things like maps and information are very important to have in your booklets and in your self-caterings, any of your units. And the more you can provide, the better. With responsibility, though, of course, to protect our rare species, to our eagles, our otters and things. There comes a great responsibility to make sure that we don't give away vulnerable locations, and we're teaching people how to watch responsibly and not disturb willfully or through neglect as well, through carelessness, because that is a challenge. And part of the green and wildlife side of things we're seeing as well is that a lot of folk are using eco products these days. They're using eco branding, and they try and bring in nature as part of their marketing. The folk we've got coming in now from other parts of the country, they are very savvy to this, and it is a big marketing ploy, but be very careful not to play a game and be accused of greenwashing, where you're basically trying to cover up what you're doing just with a few pretty flowers and things. You need to know what you're talking about if you're going to be going down that route. Just 1 minute of tips. I know I've just overshot with my delay there. If you're going to offer wildlife things, just learn what you've got first on your croft. Wildlife, even our reed buntings, our stone chats, our meadow pipits are of value. But things like cuckoos and eagles and harriers, lap-winged snipe, they're of great value. Corncrakes, crikey, I mean, folk would give their left peg for views of corncrakes, and even the flowers as well. So there's lots of ways to learn. We don't have a huge amount of resources specifically for crofting, I would say, but there's plenty of experts in the region. There are clubs and societies to learn your flowers, to learn your mammals, to learn your birds, and there's lots of Facebook groups and things, as well as books. And these days there are apps galore. You could take a picture of a flower on the croft and you can have it identified within seconds, or at least get the family correct. And as Jeanette and Russell touched on as well, link this wildlife that you're interpreting or you're seeing to your guests to everything around it. Make it part of the story, make it part of the picture, the geology, the people, the culture, the history, and of course the wider land management currently and in the past as well. And don't miss that opportunity for social media. So I think that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. That was great. Lots of ideas there for encouraging appreciation of croft, how to work a croft and what happens on a croft, and all the wonderful wildlife and natural resources that we have in the croft. I think that will be of interest to a lot of new crofters as well. There's a huge amount of potential there, and it's really quite inspiring. So thank you for that. Now we'll move on to Robin Haig, who is also doing something different with our croft and croft house, which has appealed to a lot of people. So I'll hand over to you now, Robin.
Sandra, can you give me a thumbs up, please, if you can see my screen? Great, okay. Perfect. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Robin Haig and I am a film and TV drama director and also a crofter. And I share my family's croft with my father. And I'm going to tell you tonight about the Airbnb that we run and how I started and a little bit about how it works. So I started it 5 years ago. And I did it for 3 years and then I closed it down to renovate it because, as you might be able to tell from the pictures, it's pretty rough. And then COVID came along, so actually we were closed for 2 years in the end, and I'm about to relaunch it this weekend. And it has proved very, very popular. Oh, how do I move on? Yes. It's had a couple of articles written about it, one for the Scottish Daily Mail. When I started it off really, really low price, I think £45, and then I went up to 50, and now in the summer I'm 70 a night, and then now that I've done it up, I'm going to probably go somewhere around about 100. But when I started, I wasn't very confident that anyone would want to stay there. And we also got into the Guardian travel magazine under an article that they did called The 10 Best Wilderness Holidays in Scotland. So when I moved home, I moved back to the croft about 5 years ago, and I wanted to create some income on the croft. And I thought, okay, what can I do with what we've got already here on the croft? Like, what can I do without having to spend hundreds or thousands of pounds on starting some kind of new business or investing in something? And I had seen on Airbnb, somebody was renting out this like tiny little bubble caravan right up beside, parked in the driveway, right beside their house, about that far apart from their house. And I thought, wow, okay, if you can rent out that caravan parked beside your house, your rundown house, then you can do anything on Airbnb. And around about that time as well, there was this article that you might have seen in the news where some guy in New York built an igloo in his back garden and put it on Airbnb, but they took it down. So I decided as an experiment to rent out the croft house, which wasn't really being used for anything other than storing not very valuable stuff. It had been, when my parents took over the croft in the early 80s, it was condemned by the Crofting Commission, and the guy that lived in there before us, when we went to visit him when I was a kid, and like the floorboards had fallen through, and the sofa in the good living room was like sitting on the earth floor that had fallen through the floorboards. So my dad gutted it, and it was always just used for animals and keeping horses in, or pigs, sheep, storing hay, but it wasn't really being used for anything when I moved home. And so yeah, I just took everything out, and in 2 days I cleared it out, cleaned it up, spent about £100 buying a second-hand bed, a fire extinguisher and a smoke alarm, and took some images, and in the evening about 10 o'clock I put it on Airbnb, and within 1 hour I had my first booking. And this is what it looked like. So I didn't even clear out everything. I left a lot of stuff in it, like the wood and all that, leaning against the walls, because I thought, well, it gives it a bit of character. But you may ask, how on earth did I market something like that is so rough and crappy looking? Well, I used to live in Amsterdam, and when I was there, I worked for an advertising agency, and they had become famous in the advertising world for this campaign that they did for a budget hotel in Amsterdam that was called the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel. And their approach had been to, rather than trying to make it sound nice and then people would come and then be disappointed, they just made it sound really shit. And then when people came, they were pleasantly surprised. So their whole campaign was about making it sound really bad, or just being very honest about how it was. And that's how I approached the bothy. And so I just wrote a little bit of information, and I just said it's rough as guts, there's no fluffy white towels here, and I'll let you read that. You can see it now anyway on my Airbnb site. And the result was actually that people really loved it, and we did it for 3 years, and we got the most fabulous reviews. And this is just one of the many families that came and stayed. And as a few folk have said earlier, people really want to talk, and sometimes we would serve breakfast and then people would say, oh, will you join us for breakfast? And I'd be thinking, oh my God, I've got so much to do. I just want to serve the breakfast and leave. And they wanted to talk and get to know you more, or they wanted to invite you for dinner. But we found that most people who were willing to stay somewhere so rough were actually really nice. So we didn't have a bad experience on Airbnb because the people that you might not get on with or might be fussy and complain or want ensuite bathrooms, they wouldn't come and stay with us anyway. So in the Croft House, there's no running water, there's no showering facilities or no bathroom. There's a shared toilet across the yard, which I use and my dad uses as well. And the roof, it was just a single sheet of corrugated iron, absolutely no insulation. So, when it snowed or it was frosty, and then the next morning when they woke up and were breathing inside, and the sun came out and melted the frost and there was condensation, it would just drip into the bothy. And so I used to have to put tarpaulins over the bed and the sofa so that it didn't get wet. And then when I check people and explain, oh, the reason that there's tarpaulins everywhere is because it's cold and then there's going to be condensation. But people actually love going outside at night, because as you can see in this picture, which I stole from somebody's Instagram account, they got to see the stars, and otherwise they might not have gone outside to see that. Yeah, there was no bath or shower, so I offered an old-fashioned jug and basin, or said that they could bathe in the burn. And it's actually amazing how many people went up to the burn and got in a freezing cold burn just because they wanted to have that experience. You wouldn't catch me doing that, way too cold. But that was part of how I marketed it, and that was part of the experience that people were willing to do. And yeah, in the winter it must have been freezing, but I would warn everyone like how bad it was. I used to peek out in the morning and think, oh my goodness, is their car still going to be there? Did they leave in the night? But I think our saving grace was that we provided this fabulous breakfast, which was a steaming hot homemade bannock, which I would cook in the oven in a skillet and serve it on this tray. Like this is a picture that I stole from someone's Instagram account as well. Every now and again, I just do like a hashtag Carbray search and see what people have been posting, and it's really interesting seeing what people get up to in the bothy and the things that they love. So I think after a tough night in the bothy where there's maybe been like wind and rain dripping through the windows, it would all be okay because they would have a lovely hot breakfast. And I think the thing, like doing the breakfast is a tie, but it's something different. And if they've been traveling around and either having fry-ups or continental breakfast, then this is something different that they hadn't experienced. I wanted to mention Instant Book. A lot of people have Instant Book, and if I'm traveling, I like to Instant Book. I just want to book something and know that I've got it, but I don't use Instant Book on my Airbnb site, and that is because I need to make sure that people know what they're coming to. So I would send a message when they booked and say, like, have you read everything? Like, do you know that there's no running water, no shower, that it's freezing cold, it's just a stone wall and a concrete floor and no insulation in the roof? And if they said yes, then I would accept the booking, because I didn't want anyone to come along and then be horrified at how cold it was or not understand what they were coming to. So it takes a little bit more communication, but for me it was worth it, because I thought, well, if someone comes and hasn't read everything, then they're going to leave a bad review. Anyway, after 3 years, the Croft House needed a little bit of TLC, and when it rained, there were leaks. There was you could see daylight through the gable end in the chimney wall, and when it rained and the wind blew in a certain direction, the windows leaked because they weren't really properly put in windows. So we closed it down and we repointed it, put a new corrugated profile roof on, put new windows in, and a like-for-like door. I looked back at old pictures of the Croft when my parents got it, and all the colours that I chose, the way I did it was to replicate the Croft as it was originally, the Croft House as it was originally. So this is what it looks like now. A lot of blood, sweat and tears went into that. So that's the exterior of it. There's still, I just want to say, there's still no running water, and there's still no cooking facilities. And the reason that I chose to do that was because, apart from the fact that it's going to cost more money to put those facilities in, it also creates more work and more cleaning. And I work away a lot, and my father runs it by himself whilst I'm away, and he's not the world's greatest cleaner. And so I need to do it in a way that is easy for him to manage. And I think that was a big part of, that's a big part of how we set it up, is that we've made something that suits our lifestyles as well. And I wanted to keep people walking outside for the to go to the toilet at night, because they love it, because they see the stars or they meet a horse or something like that. We've got quite a lot of animals in the yard. And this is what the inside looks like now. So I'm also aware that by not having running water or a private bathroom or cooking facilities, that I can't charge a premium price. But for me, I'm prepared to take that hit, because it suits me to have something that we can manage in a particular way, and that I think gives a really nice experience. And also, I just didn't want to change the look of the bothy. I didn't want to put an extension on or put a room inside. I just wanted to keep it like as it is, because I think it's very beautiful. Yeah, I think I just wanted to share with you as well that I think a lot of people, when they go on holiday, they want to go and stay somewhere that feels different. They don't want to go and stay somewhere that feels like they're at home. And I think more and more people are looking for these unique experiences, and I think that we can offer that on Crofts. And one of the, even you can go and have a look at the reviews that people have left, and one thing people say over and over is that they just felt like they're getting back to basics and we're reconnecting with nature. And I think when people live and work in cities and are stressed out all the time, they really value that, and that's something that we can offer them. One thing I thought about was my local community, and I can get a 10-pack box of Tunnocks tea cakes in Lidl for like £1.60 or 20 or something, I can't remember. Or I can get a 6-pack box from my local shop for nearly £2. Or I can buy a bag of flour in Lidl for 40p and a bag of flour in my local shop for £1.60. But I decided that if I was going to be making money, even if it wasn't loads of money, if I'm making money, then I would like to put that into my community. So I only buy my supplies from the local shop, not for myself, but for the business. I buy from my local shop and I pay the extra because I would like to be able to give something back. And that's another thing about not having cooking facilities, is it means that people often eat out locally. So it means that they're going into the village and spending their money and then helping local businesses. And I just would like to say this, and this is a big part of it for me, that agritourism isn't just about providing an extra income on the croft, it's also about sharing the benefits by supporting local jobs and your community. We get really lovely reviews, and often people leave us little notes like this that we find in the morning after they've checked out. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stay till the end, but if you would like to get in touch, this is my email address, and you're more than welcome to get in touch and chat anything through with me, or ask questions, or just share something that you're thinking about doing. I'll be very happy to chat with you. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Robin. That was amazing to see your innovative accommodation, which I was aware of before, but it's great to see it, and also the transformation that you've done. Again, another very inspiring presentation, and something fairly unique, or totally unique there, but shows the scope that there is for providing all sorts of accommodation for all sorts of guests, and how rewarding it can be. And just congratulations to you, I think, for coming up with something so different and so popular, and it just shows what people will like, and what their expectations can be, and how you can manage their expectations. I'm sure there will be questions for you, and I'm sure people will get in touch. We'll now go on to Liz Allen, who's going to talk about her journey towards chalets on her croft.
Unmute myself. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank
Oh,
you.
you can hear me. That's fine. Thank you. This is great. I'm learning lots of stuff listening to all those lovely people just now. My name is Elizabeth Allen and I live in our croft in Rogart, as of numerous generations before me. I hope you don't mind, but I've written this all down. I make a mean cheese souffle, but I'm afraid public speaking's not my forte, but I'll try. I live and work on our 36 hectare croft along with my husband and 2 of my 4 children who still live at home, although sometimes that's debatable, being teenagers. We've just been granted planning permission to develop part of the croft as a small holiday accommodation business with my eldest daughter and her husband who live in Edinburgh with their 3 children, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And we are right at the beginning of this process, although progressing. First, I think it's a wee bit appropriate to give you a wee bit of a background as to how I've ended up in this journey and my life on the croft in general. As I've mentioned before, our family have run this croft for over 3 generations and beyond. My grandfather living in this house I'm in at the moment, then my parents lived in it, and now me. I'll never get rich with property as I'm always handing it down. Over the last 20 odd years, my father has handled the cattle and the paperwork side of the croft, while I have overseen the sheep and all that entails. Dad retired as the local postie when he was in his late 50s due to ill health, but has enjoyed running the croft for 30 years after that. He's like the proverbial cat with 9 lives, only he's now on number 15, but he's still going, which is brilliant. Our lives changed suddenly 4 years ago when Dad had a stroke, and overnight we found ourselves solely in charge of the croft. Although Dad had made a reasonable recovery, the stroke signalled the end of his crofting activity. He's fairly immobile, but his brain is as sharp as a tack, and he's great to have his input and knowledge to help us. But he generally leaves us to find our own path, well, most of the time. That was a huge shock to the system, Dad having his stroke. Literally overnight, everything, we were in charge, and there was no help, because he was too ill at the time. Sheep, tick, no problem. I'd done that up until now, but that's where my comfort zone ended. We had no clue how to work a cow. I mean, literally, I had to go around them all and take photographs of them and match up their lag tags and take them into Dad at the hospital and ask him, who's this and what am I doing? IAX forms, that was interesting. VAT, hadn't a clue. Tax return, there again, eek. Long story short, we found ourselves in a position where we had to make the croft work for us. We both work. I work in a school kitchen and my husband works offshore. We have spent the last 4 years settling into our new responsibilities and making changes to fit in with our family. So this is when the light bulb moment kind of came. A friend was visiting one day for a social distanced outside cup of tea, and she was admiring our stone-built peat shed, a passing comment that it would make a great holiday accommodation. This kind of got my cogs turning. I then mentioned it to my daughter and son-in-law who were visiting from Edinburgh at the time. And I might add, paying £150 a night to stay in a log cabin nearby. Their cogs started to turn too. The idea grew over a couple of days and we started looking around the croft for a suitable site to build 2 or maybe 3 small holiday cabins. That's when I remembered that my father had always wanted to build a caravan site in a particular field. He's into motorbikes and trials riding and things like that. And he used to let lots of kind of bikers just casually park in the field if they'd come for events and things. So basically X marks the spot. We had our plot. I wonder, Sandra, could you put picture number 1 of the plot? It's the green field ones. It covers 0.5 of a hectare out of a 1 hectare field. It's a very pretty site. It's surrounded by trees. It has a barn running down the side of it, and it's very accessible to the village, which is very important to us. Crucially, the site has good access and has power and water connection points nearby, so it's making it a good cost-effective field to develop. After that, the WhatsApp pod group was set up. Oh heck, it's starting to look official now. So it all headed off from there. I'm very fortunate in that I have a family with a very handy set of skills. My daughter is a horticulturist at the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. My son-in-law works in engineering project management. I'm not quite sure what that is, but that's what he does. He's a very organised guy and he loves a spreadsheet. And to be honest, my husband and myself had very little to do up until this point in the way of site design and planning applications so far, as our son-in-law does that for a day job and has been more than happy to get stuck into the project, especially, you know, as it's a personal interest to him. I've been assured that our contribution to the business will come later once the cabins are up and running and in need of regular cleaning and keeping our guests happy. The process so far, first was to pick accommodation units that we'd felt would suit our vision for the site. We considered several options from more than 20 different suppliers, weighing up purchase costs versus potential rental income. We even travelled to kind of Birmingham to a glamping show exhibition to get some ideas. I wonder, could you put the photo of the unit, please, Sandra? I'm not seeing you here, I'm just seeing what I've written, so I'm not quite sure what's going up, but I'm kind of hoping that's what's happening. We settled on a large clad lodge, measuring 8.5 metres by 4.5 metres. My son-in-law's research that he did very intensively suggested that the luxury accommodation would be more profitable than the more basic cabins where we were. So our cabins hopefully are going to be spec'd to a high standard that features, you know, things like a luxury bathroom, fully equipped kitchen, high quality flooring, energy efficient infrared heating, and lots of glazing to make the best of the surrounding views that come from the site. With the help of a landscape designer friend, we got drawings made up for the site for 3 of these lodges and submitted a planning application. I think that was in December last year, I think it was. Unfortunately, the application was not approved due to the council having concerns that the units were too close to the burn and potentially a risk of flooding. Although in Dad's living memory, he's never seen, you know, a flood in that field in his life, but who knows. So it was back to the drawing board, I'm afraid. My son-in-law came up with surveying equipment in tow, and after a long afternoon of me wandering around the field with a measuring staff and lots of shouts of bit to the left, bit to the right, it's only knee deep, our new measurements were complete, ready to submit a homemade flood risk assessment to support planning application number 2. We decided to try this approach just in the first instance, as a professional survey was looking to cost upwards of about £3,000. So I thought we'd try it this way first. In retrospect, the first planning being rejected has turned out to be a blessing in disguise, really, as we started to look at the site with different eyes. We jiggled around the site plan, moved the units further from the burn, which meant that we had to drop down from 3 units to the planned 3 to 2. But however, now the units are in a far nicer place, which we never thought of before, and they're all in a more private position, each with a nice view of the burn. And also revising the layout has also given us the opportunity to develop a better planting and landscaping plan. Cue the horticulturist. This is where she gets very excited. She had come up with the idea of planting a wildflower meadow. I wonder, could you put that one up, Sandra, please, of the wildflower meadow? Thank you. That's actually a picture of a meadow shown in Campbell Gardens in Fife, which we visited really recently, just to give you an idea. She was saying maybe for the first year or 2 she put an annual planting in, but after that she'd put a more sustainable perennial native meadow into the thing. I'm planting a selection of new trees designed to kind of complement the surrounding native trees and to provide screening between the accommodation units and to enhance the screening from public view. Also, she's planning a wild hedgerow, which will be planted around the site perimeter. Future plans, I think she's kind of thinking also of introducing an orchard with some native fruit trees. I wonder, could you put the hedgerow picture up now, Sandra, please? It's just to give you an idea of just the kind of thing that she's thinking about. The ideas have actually just kept coming. There's talk in the future of maybe involving the local school for Harvest Festival with the apple juice pressing and the likes, and maybe some, with our experience, some tree, fruit tree pruning classes and things like that. So it's just involving the community and the village as a whole. Another plan is to make accessible a set of 3 ponds that Dad developed as part of a scheme years ago, which are nearby. They're teeming with wildlife and are a lovely kind of peaceful oasis on the croft. And the site will be, as many of the other speakers have said today, it will be running alongside the working croft. So they'll probably see lots of me running around sweating, chasing sheep, but that's all the part of the fun. We were delighted to find out just 2 weeks ago that the planning application number 2 has been approved. So the final hurdle to cross before we can start work on the site is to complete the decrofting process. The applications were submitted back in July and we're just eagerly awaiting some feedback now. But with a bit of luck, we'll have everything in place, ready to open for our first customers early next summer. And for me, like our last speaker was saying, the whole joy of it, apart from bringing extra income into the croft, is kind of involving the community, and also it's giving my family an investment in the village that they grew up in, and it's keeping the connection strong. And who knows, one day they might even want to move up here. So so that's about it, really. We're just at the very start of it, and we're new to it, but we're finding our way. So if anybody'd like to ask any questions afterwards, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So that's me, I think.
Thanks.
Did you hear that?
That's another a lot of work and a lot of information there about how to go about setting something up, and it just shows that it's never as easy as you hope it will be, but it's certainly worth persevering with and overcoming the obstacles. And as you found, sometimes the first direction that you're thinking of taking isn't the one that's going to be the best one, and in your case, the planning refusal helped you move on to something that sounds like it's going to be much better and really, really good.
Yes.
And before I pass on to the next person, please give your father my best wishes. He was a stalwart in the Crofters Union, and I really like being in his company, and he's just a great man, and I'm sorry I haven't seen him for years, but
thank you very much.
glad to hear he's still doing well.
He's very much doing well, thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to Helen, who's our last speaker, and what Helen's doing sounds really interesting as well, so look forward to hearing that. Then after that we'll get on to the discussion, and we're running a wee bit behind, but I haven't shortened anybody because it's been so interesting hearing all the different things that people are doing, so we'll have plenty of time for a chat and discussion afterwards. So thank you, Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Fiona, I was wondering if you could possibly share my screen. Do I just share my screen? Do I just press a button on mine, or do you have to give me permission or something?
Yes, you've got permission, Helen.
I've got permission. Oh, thank you,
Yeah.
Fiona. Sandra, sorry. So help. There we are. That's not what I want. Oh, so what I'm trying to do is get to my share. I don't want that. I'm trying to share. Oh, there we are. Yeah, I think there. Okay, so this is the first. Yeah, you can see that all right. So 23 years ago, myself and my husband, who's that, I think it might be him up there with a hard hat on, came with our 3 young children. We bought a croft, an owner-occupied croft. It was 12.5 acres in Skye, the northwest of Skye, in Edinburgh, and it goes up to common grazing, and it's in a run rig going all the way down to the loch side, and it's cut by the main road. And when we did that, I was. Well, we just had 2 young girls and a baby girl, and and 2 ruins on the croft. This is one of them, and our house, which we knew it had wet rot, but then it discovered that it had dry rot. So the first, it was all, a little bit like there was a certain amount of trepidation for me because. I was thinking, what on earth am I doing here? Quite a lot of the time, to be honest, when I first got there. But now, all these years later, we have 2 self-catering places and, quite a thriving croft. And I'm just starting my own mini business. So this is about that journey, really. And all the way along, I think our aim is about sustainability and healing, giving a healing experience for people coming here. But this has all been in stages. Luckily for me, my husband Alistair, his background is in land management and in project working, both in the UK and also in Africa. We both worked in development in Africa for quite a few years, so he's good at long-term planning. He's good at seeing the big picture. And to be honest, I wasn't really. Because my background is in sort of the creative arts, and particularly theatre and drama therapy and shiatsu massage and stuff like that, which doesn't really go with the croft. Even though I was actually brought up on mull, so I do know about that. But anyway, so this is the first picture of many. And as you can see, just take a note of that little, that rather scary outside stairs. And this is an example of Alistair's planning, because sort of this is what we've done. This is our latest project, 23 years later. It's the same house, but it's still got that, we obviously got rid of that. We got rid of that thing that was just taken away. But now 23 years later, we've got it back again, but it's made by a local artist. And this is called the Merman. And so all these are all they're all seaweed, and it's all lovely. So we're using local people, and also you can see a place to sit out, and that's gorgeous. It's just transformed. You can see that. You can sit out there now. And and there's our cat who's interested, and there's some people looking out over it. So, and that's a kind of like a wall next to, in fact, you can see it. Oh, well, never mind. Anyway, the reason why I took that wall is that we had a flood here. This is just next to that very, very cottage. And we had a flood and it completely ruined it. In fact, it happened in April, just as we were going to open. And so we've actually used it we've had this built now, and it's become a real sort of feature. So out of the trauma of the flood, which completely ruined the inside of the house, came this, and this is the outside of it, and that's why that's the Merman. And this is another self-catering place. It's called Taiduch, which is the Black House, obviously, and this is what it looked like 23 years ago, and it had an old. Anyway, this is what it looks like now. So you see it's a bit changed, and there's even a man shed now. That's where Alistair does his work, which isn't when he's not crofting. But as I said, we've done things in stages. We started getting crofting. We started getting animals and like that. There we are. But also, but one of the first things we did, which I haven't got any pictures of, which is why I've jumped to the croft to these pictures, is we planted 3,500 trees as a shelter belt all the way around the croft, which was really important. In order to, and 23 years later, it's become a kind of croft walk, which you'll see. And then we planted them, obviously not ourselves, but we had help from something called woofers, willing workers on organic farms, which are wonderful people who come from all over the world, and they stayed with us. Got to know our children, which was really good for them as well, to meet people from different places, but also help to plant all those trees, which is wonderful. And so another plan was to kind of plant vegetables and try to become as much as we could sustainable for ourselves. And it's taken ages, but now we have this. We have a polytunnel which got lots of yummy things in it, and also a fruit cage. Really, thanks to lockdown, when I had a daughter and her boyfriend and somebody else that was furloughed with her. She's a dancer, but plus another daughter, and they all came and helped. Well, I had COVID and was stuck in with our self-catering houses. And when I came out, lo and behold, there was a fruit cage. And that's the inside. It's got, yeah. And so we've got lots of fruit, lots of yummy produce, which is for ourselves, but it's also for the people who come to the cottages. One thing that is important when I talked about the cottages is the sustainability of, oh God, that's right, yeah. We also have lots of, what's it called? Nettle soup, it's very good. And those are our garlics. But yes, our the sustainable, the houses have been done as sustainably as possibly, in the sense that we went all around the place trying to go to old yards to find as much as possible. We used recycled stuff for our cottages, but now we don't sell this is for our own consumption, but we do also give the people who come to the cottages, they can enjoy our produce, and it's lovely watching children pick out a carrot and eat it, and wash it and then eat it, or blueberries, and discover the taste and what it tastes like for the first time in their life, fresh carrot. And that's our lots and lots of apples with our very curious cat. And so we've got fruit trees as well, again. So this is what we've done over the 23 years. And, so what happened was that about 7 years ago, I was working part-time, my husband was working as well and things. But when the children got older, I thought, well, my background is, as I said, theatre and shiatsu massage and whatever. And so we managed to buy this armadillo, it's called, which is where I do my shiatsu massage, and I offer it and Reiki, and I offer it to the people who come, the visitors, but also it's also sort of available locally, and people come, and it's a really healing space. It's wonderful. That's me doing a massage in the evening, but with that the person, I had the person's consent to have that photograph taken, so I'm getting right. And then this is just taken a couple of days ago. I just like the colours. This arch is going to appear a little bit later as well. So there's me giving a shiatsu. God, sorry, I'm not very good at this. I don't know how to get rid of it. Anyway, good. And then this is a beautiful bench that was made by a friend of ours, and there's wildflowers around it because we're getting gorgeous different things, and that's just somebody saying how much they found it a very peaceful, healing place. And I think that's the point all the way through, is the aim is to make people feel so completely different, especially nowadays. It's so important. So now, this is quite a lot of growth after 23 years, and this is I've started to also started a kind of a croft walk, which I'm taking people around the croft. It was very interesting to hear how Phil talking about it, and I call them sort of meditative walks. And so I use a little sort of important little tool, which is a kind of like a magnifying glass to get people to look really, really closely at things as well as sort of macro. And using apps to find out what things are when we don't know, but also using it as, because of my training, I can, sometimes we build dens, and sometimes people just want, also we can have a kind of almost like using it as a sort of a healing, a way of finding what corresponds with what's going on inside them. It's like a kind of an experience, using objects that they find on the croft. This is just to show the croft at the bottom, and a nice little bench that we made with some people. And this is, I've done some workshops actually using this is the inside of the Black House, the Taiduch. We did a workshop using a local artist, Caroline Deere, and you can see sort of explaining weaving, and we found all the stuff around the croft, and then we made our own things. It was wonderful. But also that's another experiential thing that we did, and we had a lot of fun dancing. Also, my daughter, my middle daughter Molly, is a dancer, and so she's using the shed that we've got as a way of dance. She's been using it in lockdown to make shed dances, but she's also sort of been creating, using a space to create workshops. And I'm hopeful that in the future she and I will work together in workshops, either on our croft or using the local village hall. We've both separately done workshops in there, but I think I'm hoping that that's a sustainable thing. This is another example of what you find on the croft, just little things, and making things on the croft sometimes, just whatever you can. That's another example of people just exploring and making things.
Helen, I'm going to have to interrupt you there and ask you to just bring it to a conclusion, please. Everybody's gone a bit, so it's
sorry,
not just you.
Really. That's right. And I'm also hoping to get the school up, and we're working on a pilot scheme for SAS and Nature Scotland, a POBAS one, which is and also we've got the anyway. God, there's so many things I could say. I think what I wanted to say most importantly is that when I arrived, I wondered, how I could survive, and actually through finding using my own strengths, what they were, I found that I can actually integrate them into the croft as well as what's happening with the rest of the croft. The future is always unknown, but anyway, it's been a really interesting journey for me and for all of us, I think, as a family. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Sorry, I had to ask you to slow down there. But that's really interesting, and another fascinating example of how one can diversify one's croft and do different things and please a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I'm going to open this up now for questions. We don't seem to have any questions in the chat itself. So if you have a question for any of the speakers, please raise your hand. If you don't know how to do that, you go to reactions on the right-hand side of your screen at the bottom, and you see an option there to raise your hand. So if you could raise your hand, if you have a question, we'll take them in order. And then once you've finished asking your question, if you can put your hand down again, please. So any questions, or has everyone been so informative that? Thank you, Andrew. Yes. When I said, by the way, when I said raise your hand, I meant use the symbol raise your hand, because that helps me, because I can't see everybody that's on the screen. But we have Andrew Weston there, so carry on.
Yeah, just a question about for Liz. She's got 2 new lodges. Did she have to go get her decrofting sorted out before you could build the lodges, or don't you need to decroft the areas? Did you hear that?
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we're in the process of decrofting at the moment. We're just awaiting the outcome of that. But yes, we had to decroft the site. If it was just my husband and myself that were doing it, it'd be different. Maybe, well, I think we still have to decroft it anyway. But because my son and daughter-in-law are coming, my daughter and son-in-law are coming into the project with us, we're having to make a separate business, if you see what I mean, and do it that way.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure whether you actually have to decroft, but it's wise to do it, I believe. That's what
Yes, I asked my son-in-law that the other day, and he says yes, he thought you did. He'd be more the one to speak to about that actually, but he's the one that dealt with it for us. But yes, he said that we did, but I could be wrong on that. I thought maybe, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Liz. I was just going to say, maybe if you need to raise finance to fund your project, then you probably would have to decroft, because lending agencies won't lend on croft land.
That's exactly,
tenanted
yes.
croft land.
Yes, which is a situation we're in. So yeah, so we have to. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone? Sure, somebody must have something they'd like to find out more about.
Have you got the contact of the Helen? We can maybe. Well, that was quite interesting there. I think we have.
Andrew, could you mute yourself again, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. One of the questions that I saw in the chat was about public liability insurance for campsites, caravan sites, and Russell answered that in the chat. And basically, all crofters should have public liability insurance. If you're having people on your croft for any reason at all, but even if you're not inviting people onto your croft, if somebody comes on, you should certainly make sure you're covered by public liability insurance. And it normally comes with croft or farm insurance anyway, or if you have business insurance, you would almost certainly have public liability, and you certainly should have.
And that's over and above just whatever you'd insure, whatever buildings and installations you're putting on. But yes, everyone should have public liability insurance.
And to echo on that as well, just to check the terms as well, and be absolutely sure, always just check with the insurance company that what you're doing is covered. So we have that for the croft as well, to cover all our activities.
Thanks, Phil. Any questions from any of the people just newly into crofting who might have queries that we haven't covered yet? I think we've had a fairly exhaustive coverage of a lot of things, but I'm sure there's something else.
I've got another one if no one else has got a question. One for Phil. We're new to it. We've got a new croft which has been left. It's 50 years overgrown, and I want to not have livestock, but I want to bring it up to speed in a rewilding type of way. Is there anybody that's similar to Phil who you recommend who can help us in advice? We don't have a background in horticulture or tree planting and stuff, so it's 30 acres, so it's big. So it's a bit of a big issue,
That's an impressive site. No, I'd love to say there are more folk with knowledge, but I get a lot of inquiries myself because I'm out there doing it. But I don't know many other folk out there. There's a very good business opportunity for folk out there for consultancy side of things, and I'll be looking at Jeanette and SAC for that kind of angle as well, because there are plenty of folk out there. So
Antoine, SCF.
I would just echo what's in the
just
comments, that the Woodland Trust are really helpful if you're wanting some
SAC
advice
and see if they can
trees.
provide.
So you were breaking up again a bit there, so I think other people started speaking at the same time as you were, so apologies for that. We now have Robert Cameron with his hand up and Russell with his hand up. I noticed Robert first, so we'll start with Robert.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just for Andrew's benefit, there is funding available as well for consultancy work that you can apply for, which is handy.
Thanks, Robert. And of course, there's the College of Agriculture, as Jeanette was probably trying to say, and I think I spoke over her. So the College of Agriculture would encourage people to become members of that, and of course, most importantly, SCF members and others have access to our training programs. We don't have very many on the go at the moment, but we will certainly hope to have some in the future, and we encourage you all to take advantage of them. Russell, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. It's just really to say, listening to the presentations, the theme that seems to come out to me is that people are building on what they have already. So Helen had a lot of interest there, so she's taken those and developed them in the croft. Robin had an old building on the croft, which she has developed, so something there she's working on. And, Phil with with the countryside and environmental stuff, maybe even us with our view from the caravan side. These are things that are there that you have, that you might say exploiting or developing, or you're using in some way to build a business so you can continue to exist and to live in the croft.
Thanks, Russell. Yes, crofts have so many assets, and that's what we can develop and use and sell. And it's interesting now to see how many people are, but not surprising, how many people are using social media, and that is obviously a way to get across to so many people, especially to younger people. And I was a bit resistant to social media, but I can certainly see the benefits of it. Anyone else with any points? Well, the lack of more questions shows that we've covered everything very thoroughly and exhaustively, and I hope we haven't overwhelmed you all with too much information. We are recording this session, and so I think copies would be available afterwards if everybody wanted them to follow up on anything or revisit some of it. Am I right in that, Sandra?
Yeah, the link will be in the next newsletter, Fiona.
Thank you. And if any of you want to contact any of us individually, you have the links from the information that Sandra put out, and you can contact us all that way. If I can help with anything, I'm Fiona@crofting.org, and other people have given their email addresses already. It's good when we can all help each other. Sharing experiences and sharing knowledge is very, very valuable. That's what this kind of exercise is about. And I've certainly learned a lot of things from the different presentations today. As I've said already, it's been very inspiring. So if nobody else has any points, I'll just wind this up now and thank all our speakers again. It's been really fascinating and helpful, and just shows the variety of things that can be done on a croft and through crofting. And thank you all for your contributions, and thank you for attending and participating. And one last chance for any more questions, otherwise we'll close it down now. It's surprisingly earlier than usual, but then you'll all get a chance to go and have your tea if you haven't already had it.
It's been great. Yeah, lovely. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Yeah,
Thank you
really
very
good.
much.
Good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Good
Yeah,
night.
yeah, good.
Good.
Good night.
Good night.